my channel. Today's a beautiful day in New York. It feels like fall and it's really, really nice today. And as it's cooling down, I have some orchids in need of a repot. So I've got my dendrobium back there, which is finally fading after 2 months. My Wilsonara is still going strong. The flowers are still very pretty. So that one is still in full bloom. I've got a couple more Oncidiums here. One is actually in spike. My Oncidium Cherry Baby Red Fantasy that has a spike, which you can see right there, and a new growth. But the focus on today's video is repotting Oncidiums. So today we're going to repot this monster. This is probably my largest orchid, and I'll walk through Oncidium orchid care as well. So when you think about orchids, you don't always think about Oncidiums. I think a lot of folks, they see Phalaenopsis orchids in their supermarkets, and that's the most common kind of orchid. But Oncidiums, they're also pretty popular, not as popular as Phalaenopsis. I would say they're probably the second most common type of orchid out there that you see, but they're super easy to care for. So I'm gonna walk you through their care, and we'll repot these two orchids right over here. So generally with Oncidiums, they grow pseudobulbs. Depending on the type of Oncidium, every year they will throw out a new growth. And each of these growths will throw out a flower spike. So as you can see right over here, we've got a flower spike that came out of this bulb. Now, depending on the variety, they don't always rebloom after. So it may, the pseudobulb may just throw out one spike and then it'll focus on a new growth. And then that new growth will grow that new flower spike. Now, the big thing that I've learned in growing Oncidiums these last couple of years, and I've made so many mistakes with them, is that you have to keep the Oncidium media pretty moist. So they like sphagnum moss mostly, generally. If you have a complex hybrid, they may have different care, so I recommend you look up your specific Oncidium. But generally speaking, Oncidiums have very thin roots and they like more moisture. Now these plump pseudobulbs here, they hold a lot of water. So if you don't water it, now and then, they're capable of sustaining themselves and surviving because these hold water. But there's some side effects to not watering frequently. They'll get crinkly leaves, and I've made a video on my very first Oncidium that didn't take good care of that orchid, and it shows. So the biggest thing here is making sure that it's getting enough hydration and enough water. And when you're repotting, which we'll do shortly, you don't want to suffocate the roots. And generally, these will grow new growths as they develop. And this one over here, the flower spike is spent, so we're going to cut that off. But it has a new growth right here. You could see it at the base right over here. So this is a brand new growth, and this was where future flower spikes will come from. And generally the flower spikes won't come from the older bulbs. They're continuously growing. Sometimes a couple of growths per year, sometimes one growth per year. It really depends on the kind of Oncidium. But let's get started with the repotting. All right, so let's see what we're working with over here. I started with soaking this pot in water so that we can loosen up the medium. And I've also sterilized my equipment. So let's see what we're working with over here. I'm gonna squeeze the pot, just make sure that, oh, wow, these are a lot of roots. I was thinking of putting this in a smaller pot, but we'll see what we have here. So now what we've got to do is loosen up the sphagnum moss. It looks like it's not super dense. So we'll start taking this off and then just slowly just work my way through this medium. Then we can get everything nice and clean. But this root system looks great. It is not bad at all. This is more roots than I expected on this orchid. I will speed up, take the rest of the sphagnum moss out, and I will come back. So I've got most of the medium out. The root system looks really good. It did have the plug, the original plug when this was growing in the middle, so I'm gonna have to cut some roots. But overall, the root system looks really good. I'm gonna cut the flower spike as well, but I'm gonna clean this up and give this a good power wash, and then we'll cut the roots out. All right, everything's nice and clean. Root system looks good. First thing we gotta do is cut off this flower spike. This had really pretty flowers, but when you're repotting, you always need to get rid of that spike. And I've sterilized my scissors. So we're gonna go right in here and give it a cut. And the flower spike will come back later. You can put a little bit of cinnamon there to seal this up, which I'll do at the very end. But let's take a look at the roots. So this root system looks really, really good. I'll say that towards the middle, I noticed a couple of roots that needed to be cut. They're all really firm, but the way that you know if it's not very good is if it's papery and if it pulls off and if you see this little stringy stuff. This is firm from here. Oh, that one came off. If it's firm, it's okay. If it's like very, like right here, I'm gonna start cutting some of these off because they look like mushy and dead. And if they're like, say you pull on it and then it'll like yank off, like you see how this is just very, very papery, these gotta go. So I'm gonna cut these out, these soft, mushy roots over here. These were in the middle where the plug was. And that's where they usually grow these orchids, within a plug, and then they covered it in sphagnum moss. So I mean, overall, this is not bad. These roots are super healthy, especially these white plump ones. You could tell that they're new. And generally, the newest growths will have the best roots. So this is going to be growing. This is the new bulb, and you can see a new root coming down. So all of the roots will come from here. So you want to make sure that we have room on this side when we're potting. But I'm going to clear out the roots that are dead, and then I'll be back. All right, so most of the roots, the bad roots, have been cut off. I've left the majority of them. I mostly just cut the ones that were in the middle with the plug. Some folks like to cut the roots from the older pseudobulbs, but in my opinion, this one only has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pseudobulbs, so I'm gonna just be more conservative and leave most of these. They all look in pretty good shape anyway, and they're very firm. So I'm just really surprised that all of these fit into this 3.5-inch pot. I was going to put it in a 4-inch pot, but I think it's best that, yeah, let's put it in a 6-inch pot. Well, this is a 6-inch pot outside, 5-inch pot inside, so this should be enough for some growth. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna clear my space here. And I've made a bark and sphagnum moss mixture, which I've gone through in my self-watering video. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna fill the bottom with some moss. I'm gonna keep this nice, light and airy. Oh, forgot one step. So this one requires a wick. So I'm going to grab that wick and put it through. I'm gonna grab it from here. We're gonna put the wick through, and the wick will be in contact with the water reservoir. So I'm gonna do this in self-watering because this orchid likes moisture. There we go. And I'm actually gonna lift it up a little bit so that the water can come up and be with further up with the orchid. So I put a little bit of moss in the bottom, and I've got the wick further up, and I am putting my orchid in here, and I'm gonna just turn it around a little to get it down. And you know, the most important thing is that the new growth is gonna happen from here. So likely this will be the area where all of the new growths come from and all the roots. So I want to make sure that there's room for them. So I'm going to put the oldest growths in the back and give room for the new growths to grow from here. You know, these roots are pretty long, so I'm just spinning it in the pot a little bit. I'm going to put this wick a little bit further up and to the side. I'll add a little moss actually. Put the moss over that, the wick. There we go. And then let's do this. Let's turn, 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 turn. Turn a little more and fit it in. This definitely surprised me with the root system it has. It's really nice. And the goal here, we don't want to pack this down too much because it's going to stay moist. And we don't want to suffocate the roots. So that's the biggest thing with orchids. When we're potting them up, a lot of folks have trouble with orchids, but it's really about how you're potting them, provided it's potted properly and it's airy and there's air movement for the roots, everything will be okay when you water, and they don't generally have too much trouble. So we'll fill around the pot, making a little bit of a mess here, but that's okay. We'll clean up when this is done. So it's not super packed down. You could see it's like pretty fluffy. And the bark helps a lot as well. It keeps a lot of air in the roots and the perlite as well. So there we go. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna top this off with a little bit of moss and finish up, and then we'll be all set with this orchid. We are good to go with this one. So it's got room, this is the new growth, and then any further growths will likely come in this direction, and there's plenty of room for those new growths to come out. And this should be good for a while, maybe a year or two. And should be happy here. So I'm going to give it a water, clean up, and then we'll pot the next one. So this orchid here is going to be a challenge due to its size. So I'm going to take it out of the pot and show you guys what we're working with. So I actually had to cut the pot because it was pretty stuck in there. So it's like, I don't even know, but we'll start removing the, wow. This has been in there for so long, and like, look at those bulbs. I've never seen anything like it. So we'll start breaking this down. All right, let's see what we can do here. This is like so dense. I don't know if this was bark that's just completely broken down, but it is well overdue for this repot. Oh my goodness. This is going to be really challenging. Yeah, so it looks like it was bark that broke down completely. Oh, I should have worn gloves. I will try to break this down and come right back. So it's been over an hour, and this has been the most difficult repot I've ever had to do. I hacked through this whole orchid. There's still some medium left at the base. I'm going to try to get the rest of that out, but I cut the flower spikes. This one has been really difficult, but I'll come back and finish up. So I've spent almost 2 hours trying to clear this out. This has been the most challenging orchid I've ever repotted. It just looks like they potted it up years ago and never took it out. And the way that you could see the bulbs as well, you could tell that it didn't really have much chance to spread out. So I've cut the 3 flower spikes. I do have 1 flower spike here. I'll be surprised if it does anything. I lost about 3/4 of the orchid, rather 3/4 of the roots of this orchid. And I didn't even bother cutting that much off. just because I had to rip through a lot to get the bark out, and I'm not even confident that I got everything. It's just really tedious to get everything out from here. So I'm going to repot it and finish up. So I'm going to put it in the self-watering pot. I'm going to mix sphagnum moss and bark on the bottom. As usual, keep it fluffy. And with this orchid, because I removed so many roots because I had to force a lot of the medium out, I just didn't even cut most of the bad roots, and I'm not even 100% confident that I got everything, which is a little bit of a bummer. But we will put it into the 6-inch pot. I think this will be fine. This will give hopefully some room for future growth. And I will fill around this root ball and then be right back. I'm finally all done with these Oncidiums. I'll say that this one, which is my Oncidium High-Low Firecracker New Year, this was the most difficult repotting I've ever done. This orchid was clearly in a small pot for years. And, it even had the plug in it, and it took me almost 2 hours to get rid of the medium. I hope, I did get rid of a lot of roots. Hopefully that spike will be okay. I may cut it off just so that it could give the roots a chance to establish, but this one was insane. This one, which is my Brassostel Tarantula Sweet Orange, was not too bad. Not a hard repot, but they're both in self-watering. And we're all good to go. So I topped this off with a little bark. I'm going to finish this one off with some bark as well. And then as a next step, I will water these with a little bit of nutrient solution. I'll probably add a little Super Thrive and then give them a little rest, and then we'll see how they do. Well, thanks everyone for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time. Bye.